Hello, everybody. Welcome back to this week's edition of Conversations from the Trenches. Before we say anything, please do accept our apologies for being late. As you know, Precious is in Zimbabwe, and we've been having quite an interesting 20, 30 minutes trying to get ourselves hooked up and connected and audible. Hopefully, we've got it fixed up. If you can see Precious, she's very creative. So she's actually holding a second phone as a mic. And let me just say, I'm very impressed by your creativity. Well, Precious, welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you, Rika.
Uh, so today we're going to be talking about what the UN has 2 days ago called as a shadow pandemic. And initially, when I saw this news report by the Secretary General of the United Nations, and I heard about the reference to a shadow pandemic, I thought he was probably talking about mental well-being, because there's been a lot of conversations about mental and emotional wellness during the past two years. But however, I was surprised, and let me also say I was very alarmed when I noticed that his reference was to gender based violence. Now, what alarmed me about his report were three things. Firstly, the statistics that every 1 in 3 women are experiencing direct violence. Now, I'm going
Yes.
to pause for a moment and let everybody just take that in. Think of the number of women we meet in our everyday life, just every day, on the streets, in our homes, around our surroundings, in our communities, in our neighborhoods. Now think about how many of them are hiding evidence of violence behind their smiling faces, or maybe their preoccupied faces. Now, this is a real problem. And the truth of it is, for a very long time, gender violence has been looked at as a problem for women to sort out. It's a women's problem, it's not a humanities problem. And it has come to a point where the UN is actually calling it a pandemic. So, this is on all of us to do what we can to start fixing this problem. And the first place for all of us is to start talking about it. And I'm
Yes.
so grateful and very honored to have with me somebody who I know is a survivor like me, who is doing some brilliant work in Zimbabwe and has is the founder of the NGO Precious Hearts Women's Haven. So, Precious, welcome once again. Thank you so much for joining me. And please do take a moment to say something to the audience about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me here. All I can say is I'm so uh, happy that I'm part of this conversation today. And for us as women to talk more about this gender-based violence, I call it a hidden pandemic. I'm so
Yeah.
happy that the UN now sees that it's something which needs to be dealt with, just like COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes.
Myself, being a survivor of gender-based violence, it made me like to have that passion to be the voice for the voiceless. I know a lot of people, they're hiding this. They're not able to freely come out and speak about this.
Yes.
So I'm having those kind of platform, creating safe places where we can speak freely about this issue and
Yes.
giving myself my story and showing them that I've been there. It's making more women to be comfortable to freely speak about it. I
Yes.
know if we can join us, the three of us, tomorrow will be six, tomorrow will be nine, and eventually we'll cover the whole world. Yeah, that's basically saying more about me. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Precious. And you are right. I do remember we spoke about this almost a year ago, and we both spoke about gender violence being a hidden pandemic, which nobody was speaking about. And, at this point, I also want to put a little disclaimer of sorts out there. Although we are talking about gender violence, we want it to be understood that gender violence is it's culture agnostic, it's geography agnostic, it is sexuality agnostic, it is gender agnostic. This is something that affects not just women but children. It affects people from the LGBT community. It affects people, from communities of persons with disabilities. And yes, there is a minority population of men who also undergo violence. But in terms of the size of the problem, it is the women who are at the receiving end. And therefore, a
Yeah.
conversation, the conversation that Precious and I are having is very much focused on women and about the violence that unfolds within our homes and in our most personal, most intimate relationships. Okay.
Yeah.
So just wanted to set a context because we don't want anybody to feel we are excluding. We are leveraging our journeys, our experiences, but we want to know that if you're undergoing abuse or violence, we understand. And this space is as much for you to speak up and share as it is for all of us, right? So, Precious, I'm in India, you're in Zimbabwe, we're in two
Yeah.
different continents, two different cultures,
Yeah.
and something that has bound both of us is the fact
Mm.
that there is a lot of commonalities, not just in the way women are, but also how society perceives us and the gaps that are there in for people, women who are undergoing violence. Tell me a little bit about the work you're doing. What does Precious Hearts Women's Haven do, and what gap in your society is your organization meeting?
Okay. Precious Hearts Women's Haven. We are working towards the elimination of gender-based violence
Mm-hmm.
against women in marginalized communities,
Mm-hmm.
especially here in Zimbabwe. And among others, we offer temporary accommodation, which we call shelters here. We
Mm-hmm.
give free counseling services. We
Mm-hmm.
offer like aid advice to those who doesn't know the channels to acquire certain documents to protect themselves.
Mm-hmm.
We help with skill training because you find most of them they end up being in abusive relationship because they are not financially stable. So we
Yeah.
create those skills where they can generate their own income on
Yes.
their own. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, this is what we are doing. And along the way, we create those safe places that I was talking about because
Yeah.
it's one of the things that I noticed that we are not having as women, we are not having those free places where we can go and discuss freely about these issues of abuse, especially as women.
Yeah.
Because you find if you go to any to churches or religion groups, uh, it's not allowed to speak out. Like everyone will look down upon you if you speak out about abuse. In
Mm.
communities, they like endure the pain so that you given that crown like this is a strong woman who endure the pain in abusive relationship, all those kind of steps thing. And
Mm.
moreover, there are women, as women on our own, we look down upon each other if someone tried to speak out. So we are trying to sensitize and allow people to understand this,
Yeah.
I call it hidden pandemic, that is there and it's real. And
Mm.
the worst part, in most people that I've interacted with, they're not even aware that they are in abusive relationships.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we do to try to show people the red flags. Some of the things they can notice that they are being abused. So that's
Yeah.
basically what we do it Precious as Women's Africa.
Okay. Precious, just because we come from two different cultures and, while there are commonalities, obviously there are differences in the way our societies are, and there are differences in the way men and women are expected to be in a social context, in a family context, right? Help us
Mhm.
understand what is the role and position of women, say, in a Zimbabwean society, or even if it is relevant in an African context. What is the role that women, how do the society at your end view women And what is the
Okay.
roles that you're expected to play?
In Zimbabwe, it's like it's kind of patriarchal society in a way.
Hmm.
So you
Hmm.
find women are inferior, like they are like kids when it comes to men.
Hmm.
They are less in a way, like they don't hold that power, and they are not expected to take even higher position, be it at any work, be it in politics, be it in anything, even religious. They are
Hmm.
supposed to. You have to be submissive, but the way
Hmm.
they are taking the submissive part is
Hmm.
abuse in a way, because
Hmm.
if you earn something, you have to surrender everything to your men. You
Hmm.
don't have to have that kind of freedom that you can choose, like, I need to wear a lipstick. You have to get permission for that. That's the kind
Oh.
of level, the position a woman have in Zimbabwe. Though now, because the time are a little bit changing, and
Mm-hmm.
people are a bit
Mm-hmm.
understanding this kind of abuse thing, we have a few number of women who are now standing
Mm-hmm.
up. I can say women like us, because we are coming, we are many who are coming out and saying, no, we are
Yes.
women, but break the bias. We can do this. We can be
Yes.
like men, but as women. So this is how the women are positioned, like a second class beings. And moreover, we are owned by men, you know. And
Mm.
even in even if you are being abused, it's a norm, and it's normal even to society, because in society even normalized it, like, okay, even if you can get abused, it's a norm. There's nothing special. Every woman has to go through it. So this is the kind of position that we have here in Africa, or in Zimbabwe, especially.
So let me just get this right. It is that the popular social, what is normal, what is seen as normal, is a woman belongs to a man as if she's a property, and he gets to choose everything from
Yeah.
the clothes to the lipstick to her makeup to the way she does her hair, everything.
You find the moment that a man pays what we call dowry here in Zimbabwe, called lobola. The moment
Uh-huh.
that he pays that customer law, then he has power and control in everything over his wife. So you
Wow.
find, if I want to have a hairstyle like this, I have to get a permission
Hmm.
from my husband. Yes.
Hmm.
So that basically how it is here. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, something that I find very interesting in what you've told me is that men pay dowry
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
they pay a bride price. You know,
Yes. Yes.
in India, we have a problem with dowry, but it's the women who pay to their husbands. And in a lot of societies, they're still considered as a property of their husbands.
Wow. After paying that,
Yes, yes, that's so that's why I find it very interesting that it sounds very transactional to me, that I pay
mm,
money and then I buy a person who is now under my control completely, and I decide how this person is going to be, talk, walk, speak, dress up, whether she goes out of
okay.
the house. Sorry.
Even your friends, you can choose your friends for you. Where you can go and
Wow.
hang out, he can choose for you. Imagine.
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. So, I kind of have the answer here as to why that would, because I know you as a very strong person and a very strong woman who, has a lot of respect for yourself. And my next question was going to be, why are you so passionate about gender-based violence and sexual violence? If you wouldn't mind, can you share a little bit of your journey with us?
Okay. For me, I know, yeah, it's a little bit personal, but I have to help someone somewhere who is listening right now. Me, I've gone through what I can call hell. I don't know,
Mm,
maybe tenfolds than hell. I've
mm,
I always say to myself, there's no abuse which is better. But I'm
mm,
saying all the abuse type, emotionally, physically, sexually, financially, you name it, I've gone through it.
mm,
Um, and the only thing that helped me to recover, it's very unfortunately, I didn't have a, opportunity to have a counselor who can help me through. But
mm,
I got my healing through helping other women. So
mm,
this gave me strength and passion. Like I have to continue helping because I'm
mm,
helping as well as healing to my side. So
mm,
basically, that's what drive me. Like I have to continue because, of course, sometimes you meet people with the worst scenarios. Though there's no abuse, which is better, but sometimes you get other situation where you can say, "Oh my God, is this really happening?" So only by helping that person, those kind of situation can trigger even the memories of what I went through. So by
mm,
helping each other and holding each other's hands and say, okay, we can do it, we can do it. It helped me as well as helping the help seeker. So basically, this is one of the things that helped me to recover, to be a woman that I am right now, and to be a victor. What I
mm.
always call myself that, yes, I'm a true victor on this issue of gender-based violence. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Precious, I've told you about this that I grew up in a home with a lot of domestic violence. And,
Wow.
my father had a problem with alcohol, and he used to practically batter my mother every day. And I think we've been seeing this violence since maybe we were 9 or 10 years old to all the way till almost 30 years old. And something that I have recognized, as somebody who's been in a household where violence unfolded every single day, right? There
Yeah.
are two things that I've noticed that violence, a lot of people think about violence as a man beating a woman or a woman beating a man, it's physical. But you just raised
No.
a very critical point:
Mm.
emotional, verbal, financial,
Wow.
sexual, mental. Can I invite you to share a little bit more? And the reason I'm inviting you to share a little bit
Mm.
more is because I think when we talk about gender-based violence, there's a lot of
Mm.
labels that we use: gender-based violence, abuse,
Mm.
right? And a lot of stories get hidden underneath that. And when people like you and me speak up about
Mm.
what the nuances of the stories are, like for instance, I remember in my home, my mother would not only get beaten up. We would tiptoe around my father whenever he was awake. We would be walking practically on eggshells. But other than that, so there was a very, very there was a very powerful sense of fear that was taking a toll on you mentally and emotionally. Like I remember being fatigued all the time. I remember being exhausted all the time. I remember my mother being exhausted all the time. I remember going to school or college and coming back and thinking, I don't know if people are going to be alive in the house today. So I remember my psychological unsafety was so high that I think when I was 14 or 15, I told my aunt in London that if something happens to mom, you're going to adopt me. So as a child of 14 or 15, I was making plans to be adopted because
Yeah.
I was at a certain level foreseeing something tragic could happen in that house. And this is why I would like for us, as difficult as it is, to get a little
Mm.
granular so that people can understand what violence really is. Because violence is not always being beaten up. Sometimes you don't get money. Sometimes,
Yeah.
there's so much to it. And would you be open to sharing anything at all? If you're comfortable, and if you're not, that's okay. I
I
just want you
am.
to know that.
Yeah. This abuse thing. It comes in so many angles. We are talking
Yes.
about child marriages. It's
Yeah.
actually abuse. We are talking about female genital
Mutilation.
mutation.
Yeah.
Mutation. It's abuse on its own. trafficking for sex, you know that, right? It's
Yeah.
actually a intimate partner like
Yeah.
him forcing you to have sex when you don't feel like having that and forcing you on it's
Yeah.
abuse on its own. We are saying physical punishment.
Yeah.
It's abuse on its own.
Yeah.
Sexual and emotional abuse, like to me, emotional abuse, it's more worse than
Yes.
physical
Yes.
because that hurts you for years. And
Yes.
if you don't get help, you can even stroke. You can
Yes.
even go like have a depression which will destroy your health. So all those kind of things they involve in abuse. And for kids, being a bystander only,
Yeah.
watching all the drama of violence and everything, it's
Yeah.
so dangerous
It
that
is.
even at one point when you grow up, you think, I remember talking to this other colleague of mine.
Mm-hmm.
He had abused his, like physically, yet his wife. So I was
Mm.
asking, why do you do that? Then he
Yeah.
said, it's normal. I grew
Mm.
up seeing my mother being beaten up right front center, and there was
Yeah.
nothing. And us, it was just normal. So a
Yeah.
woman has to get those kind of few slaps and all those kind of things to go in the right channel, of which it's
Yeah.
wrong. So you see, it's something that that person took it from the childhood
Yeah.
background, something that
Yeah.
he grew up seeing and thinks that it's normal to hit a
Yeah.
wife, it's normal even to push those little girls at school, of which it's
Yeah.
wrong. All
Yeah.
those kind of things, it involves in this abuse as well. So basically, after I know we have those major ones, which is sexual, emotional, verbal, and physical, being
Yeah.
part of this major abuses which women faces. Not
Yeah.
forgetting financial abuse as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you know what? You make a very important point about how this affects us psychologically long after. Because I don't think a lot of people realize that when you live in an environment, and I have to say this as a child who grew up in a home with extreme violence, I have to say this, that one
Mm.
of the things that you actually develop and you experience and you need to get help with is you actually have symptoms of post traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when I went through my healing process, there would be times when I would wake up at 12 in the night, 1 in the morning, sweating,
Mm.
because I would have heard a noise somewhere, and it would trigger it would trigger a memory of
Yeah.
violence from my childhood, and I would actually wake up sweating, panicking with a racing heart. And a lot of times we don't understand this. So I'm just going to take a quick moment to say hello to two wonderful ladies who are listening to our conversation, Halcyon Joseph Claustus, talking to us all the way from Canada. Halcyon, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And Halcyon says, thank you for this important conversation. Your courage, precious, will strengthen so many women. And we have
Thank you.
Padmaja also, who says, I lived through this growing up. Thank you for talking about this topic. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for speaking up. Because, very honestly, the very fact that you're here today, the very fact that you're sharing, you're weighing in with your comments, that's an act of courage itself. And we are both very grateful you're here. Truly, very, very grateful you're here. So, going back to our conversation, Precious, I want to, I know we've talked about the society. I know we've talked about the mindsets, right? Um, but this is something that always occurs to me, that we are human beings and we belong to families, right? We
Yeah.
belong to this unit called families, and yet we women are vulnerable to violence. Why do you think we are vulnerable to violence, even though many of us have a family around us? What do you think? Tell me your take about it.
I can say in most cases, when I talk about African context or here in Zimbabwe, you find
Mm,
a low level of education
mm,
because when you are not educated, some of these things you are not even aware that it's abuse. You can hear the word abuse, but you don't know what is abuse all about. So it's
Yes.
one of the things that I can say, yes, it contributes to us women being vulnerable, as well as a history of exposure, like what we were saying, that the exposure, the background, how one
Yeah.
up in can make us being vulnerable as well, because you think it's normal to go through
Yeah.
that. Well,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong even if you face
Yeah.
it. We're talking
Yeah.
about uh, no, we are talking about witnessing family members being abused.
Yeah.
It also makes which goes back to history as well. We are talking about being marginalized. Like
Yeah.
when you're marginalized, even your self-esteem is low.
Yeah.
You can give to anything because you don't feel like you are worthy to do this kind of thing. You are
Yeah.
not worthy to hold a higher position. You are not worthy to speak up. So
Yeah.
all those kind of things, they make us women to be vulnerable. And
Yeah.
stigma, like
Yeah.
people, they just think women, they are weak.
Yeah.
So they have to go through this.
Yeah.
So all those kind of things, they make women vulnerable to
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Precious, I don't know whether we've lost you. Oh, there you are. You're back. Great.
yeah, I can see you and hear you clearly. Yeah.
Yeah, well, folks, Precious is in Africa. The internet tends to get interrupted. Please bear with us as we go through interruptions. But, this is a soul conversation, so we are going to keep it going. Despite the
Yeah.
interruptions and the interaction, the disruptions to the conversation. And Precious, I'm going to dial back to something you said in your earlier bit, which I think is very important. And you mentioned children who grow up in families where violence is normalized. They grow
Mm-hmm.
up with learning to be violent in very small ways, in the language, in the pushing of girls at school, in talking
Yeah.
down to people. And I think this is a very important point that you have raised, because today in the world, we talk about teaching young boys. We're telling people, teach your boys to respect the girls, but nobody's telling you how to teach your boys to respect the
No
girls.
one teach them, don't hit a woman. No one. It's just men don't cry. You must be powerful. You have to
Yes,
be strong. You have to show that you are a strong man. All those
yes,
kind of things, you know?
yes, yes. Yes, I think that's a very, we cannot talk about the topic of violence and gender-based violence without talking about the stereotypes that boys and men are held to. And we,
Yeah.
we see we see a lot of this, particularly when we interact with the friends from the LGBTQ community, because we do see that so many of them are traumatized for no
Mm,
reason because they don't fit a stereotype, right?
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And we just have to give children the freedom to be who they are, whatever is the gender that they identify with, whatever is the sexuality,
Yes. Yes.
whatever, whichever part of the world they come in, or whichever community, whichever community that they're a part of, right? So,
Sure.
so now I want to go into what for me, is a very personal question. Okay, and I'm pretty sure it must be a personal question for you too. As for women who are in situations of violence, in abusive
Mm,
relationships, okay,
yeah.
there are two thought process, or two kinds of conversations that come to them. One is, why don't you just leave? It's
Yeah.
almost as easy as just pack your bag and leave. What's the problem? Why can't you leave, right? And then of course
Yeah.
there's this other side which is telling you, don't leave. Women don't, if you have left your marriage, you failed. You're a failure, right? And while I know there's a social pushback, or there's a social aspect to women staying, I know there are many more aspects to it. So my question to you is, why, according to you, do women stay in violent relationships even when they know that this is wrong, this is not for me, this affects me, and I am, it's affecting me very badly? Why do women stay?
Okay. When you hear many people saying that they are in an abusive relationship, the first question that comes to you is like, why don't they just leave? And
Mm.
it's so easy to say that.
Yeah, yeah,
Response is seen as so logical, like,
yeah,
yeah, just bags and go. But it's not easy as that.
yeah, yeah,
Let's talk about the cycle of abuse, how
yeah,
this abuse manipulate. Okay, I'll go to myself personally. Like, I stayed in an abusive relationship for more than 10 years.
mm,
And when I speak to people about it, they can easily say, "Oh, those years, why couldn't you just live just like that? Me, I can just walk away." It's not as
yeah,
easy as that.
yeah,
It's a cycle kind of
mm,
thing. There's a that building tension kind of things which happens, and
mm,
us as victims, you get used to that, and
yeah,
it comes to that point when the incident happens, maybe just a one push,
yeah,
and we go to the, I call it honeymoon phase, where you
yeah,
get all those, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to,
yeah,
you see, made me to do this, I
yeah,
didn't actually, you see, like, getting those blends from other people.
yeah,
I was having a bad day at work, I'm sorry,
yeah,
I put it on you, all those kind of things. And it goes to reconciliation, where you make up
yeah,
and get all those
yeah,
kind of gifts. If they are good at that, if you can get a
yeah,
car, maybe chocolate, all those kind of stuff. Then it
yeah,
goes to the calm part. Then it
mm,
goes back again to the tension building.
yeah,
So year by year, you get used, okay, uh, we fought today, tomorrow you say sorry, and you get back again. And it goes on and on and on like that.
yeah, yeah.
And you see,
Okay, I think we've lost Precious. So I'm hoping that she is going to come back. But as we wait for her, I'm going to weigh in on a couple of things that she raised, and I'm going to leverage my own journey as I to weigh in on what she was talking about. And one of the things I do want to highlight here, which I was going to do later on in the conversation, but I will do it right now, is the fact that when girls grow up in families where violence is a norm, when girls grow up seeing violence and watching, men behave in a particular way and men being at a particular way in the context of being violent and women being at the receiving end of violence, what also happens is that a script forms inside our head and it becomes so normal for us. And a lot of times we don't even understand or recognize how we replicate patterns in our own adult life. So I think that was something that I discovered in my own journey, in my own life, as I spent about 15 years just being involved in my parents' violent relationship. And then when I stepped out into my adult life, I found myself recreating patterns of violence. And that by itself was a challenge. So I think that's a very critical aspect of a very critical aspect that I think we have to be aware of, particularly when we are talking about cycles of violence and how it manifests. Halcyon, thank you so much for that comment. You've just said, I have seen patterns of emotional and verbal abuse develop in families, even among my relatives, and it's really sad how some women are just silenced. I've been labeled in the past as a troublemaker as being rude and disrespectful for speaking up. All I will say is thank God you exist, thank God you do what you do, thank God you speak up. I am not sure whether Precious is having any further challenges. As many of you know, she is in Zimbabwe, and yes, she's back. Thank goodness. Hello, Precious. You're back. We need to get you back on your mic. Can you hear us? I- we cannot hear you very well, Precious. Okay, so you're getting on. Okay, great. So the internet and connectivity is a challenge, and I'm just going to say, I am going to say Precious is such a trooper for just his incredible resilience. I'm just amazed at how you're smiling still. If it was me, I'd probably be crawling under my desk and crying. So I applaud you for your resilience and your creativity. And if you're back, let's resume the conversation from where you were at.
Okay, I was like what I was saying.
I cannot hear you. I cannot hear you. You need to hold the phone closer to your mouth. To your mouthpiece, yeah. No, not hearing you. It's okay. Take your time. Are you okay?
Yeah, it's just.
All right. So why don't you just come closer to the mic and speak? Come closer to the phone and speak. Maybe we will hear you better. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You're a little distant, but yes, we can kind of hear you. Yes. Yes. Halcyon says, hearing you, but very faint.
All right. How about
Uh,
now?
Much better. Much better. Halcyon, do you hear her clearly now?
Yeah, I can hear you clear. It's fine. I don't know that side.
No, we've lost you again, Precious. We've lost you again.
Oh my God.
It's
Hello?
okay. It's okay. Just breathe. Just breathe and take a deep breath and then speak up. That's it.
Hello?
Yeah. So, you know what? Just hold the phone close to your mouthpiece, move in closer, and then let's just talk. And then let's hope the gods of internet and the cell phones and whatever else it is, the technology gods will smile on us and get you back on track, right? So, you were talking about the cycle of abuse.
Yeah, so I was saying that kind of cycle is the one that makes us women to stay in a abusive relationship for this one. And when you are abused, you lose your self-esteem. And
Yeah.
you feel like you can't do without that person. So you end up staying low, like, okay, after all, it's the only person who can understand or who can love this kind of useless person,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they manipulate emotionally, they drain you, they make you
Yeah.
feel useless. So we
Yes.
end up staying for long because of that. So if you don't find someone who can help you, or if you don't notice that this is abuse, you end up staying there. And one of the things is that most women, they don't know that they are being abused. That's the worst
Yes.
part. They
Yes.
think kind of life that they are living, like here in African context, like what I was saying, it's a norm to be abused. So you
Yeah.
end up still thinking that, okay, it's normal. And
Yeah.
uh, you find most of us, we grow up witnessing our parents being beaten, being shouted at with our
Yeah.
fathers. When
Yeah.
we are now married, we think, okay, that's how marriage is. So we
Yeah.
have to just enjoy the pain and be strong like our moms did, all those kind
Yeah.
of stuff. So those are the kind of things. And you find the society we are living in, they have normalized abuse.
Yeah.
Like it's just fine for a woman to be abused. Okay, they have to
Yeah.
be treated that way
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
certain way.
Yeah.
So all those things they contribute for women to stay in longer in an abusive relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think also one of the important things is when you have grown up seeing abuse unfold at very small levels. Maybe your mom got yelled at. Maybe you saw your mother always asking your father for permission, even to get a haircut. you suddenly don't have a sense of self. Like, and that is what
Yeah.
I discovered in my journey, that I did not have a sense of self. My sense of self was entirely about other people. So it was about how useful was I to other people, and how did I know I was useful to the other people? It was in how kind they were to me. And my entire sense of self was wrapped around other people. I didn't even know who I was as a person.
Yeah.
It was only when you start going back and asking yourself, okay, what do I like? Who am I?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do I want to do? Do I want to leave? Am I happy being beaten up like this every day? That's when you really start. You don't even know how to ask yourself those questions.
Yeah.
It's a challenge to
And,
even get there.
and to make matters worse, like what I was saying, that it's something which has been normalized by society. So if
Yeah,
you go and seek help to them, they will just say, okay, this is normal. Why
yeah,
are you living in for this silly thing? Otherwise, all the women that you see, they've gone through that. That's the
yeah,
only problem. So only then, when you realize that I'm not myself, when you
yeah,
try to find the real you, that's why
yeah,
I always teach, or I always speak about self-love in
yeah,
everything. If you
yeah,
choose you first before
yeah,
everyone, then you
yeah,
can realize that this is not what I can settle for. This is not what I can
yeah,
commit to or compromise for.
yeah.
That kind of thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think also the important thing for all of us to also recognize is, the first step is to recognize that, oh, I'm being abused and I'm violent. But then almost always, everybody, even those people who say, why don't you just leave? What they don't understand is what happens after you leave, because you don't know how to take care of yourself. You're not sure. It's after you leave, the journey back is a long journey. Sometimes it's a very dark journey.
Yeah.
And you need the support and the infrastructure to do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's also a very critical aspect when people say, why don't you just leave? You have to understand, unless you're going to
Yeah.
show up and
Yeah.
hang hold us for the next many years, don't ask us
Yeah.
that question. Right?
Yeah. True.
So Precious, I want to ask you, you
Mm.
talked about the cycle of how violence develops, right?
Yeah.
What are the red flags, according to you, in the initial stage? Because most relationships have a pattern that is formed in the initial stages, and
Yeah.
then it just spirals higher and higher, right? So what are the
Yeah.
red
Yeah.
flags that people should be aware of, watching out for, and not accepting?
Okay. Let's start at the relationship as a dating level.
Yeah,
Um, you can actually notice when you are still dating that your partner is controlling,
yeah,
and you know because you are quenching for love.
yeah.
Uh, a simple thing
Hmm.
can be something which can cause attention maybe a day without even communicating to each other. I mean,
Hmm.
those are kind of
Hmm.
things that can be a red flag, because
Yeah,
now we are a boyfriend and a girlfriend. You're not even
yeah,
staying together, but
yeah,
he's doing this. What more when you stay together? Okay,
yeah,
we are talking about jealousy.
yeah,
Being jealous, like maybe you are blessed with a beautiful face like yours, Reka, where even a man can just say, "Oh, you look beautiful," or "You are dressing in a nice outfit," and your
yeah,
partner get angry with that, as if you are the
yeah,
one who have invited that person to comment or to give you a compliment. All those
yeah,
kind of things, they are red flags that we can watch out for. I mean,
yeah,
a simple tension, one raising his voice like you. Okay, we are talking in a normal voice like this. There's a
yeah,
problem with raising a voice for
yeah,
nothing. All those kind of
yeah,
thing is, I mean, just pushing you, like pushing things around, like when he's angry, he
yeah,
vent his finger to push things around, and yeah, those are the red flags. One of the days it will end up being you being pushed, being
yeah,
beaten, being
yeah,
physically beaten as well. We are talking about uh, those like, let's say he calls and you delay to even pick up a phone for few
Yeah.
seconds, and
Yeah.
he gets angry for that.
Yeah.
All these
Yeah.
kind of things, they are red flags that
Yeah.
that we can talk about.
Yeah.
They go on and on and on and on these red flags, because it's something. There are things that you know that, okay, I can not settle for this, but we tolerate because you'll be in love, or you're
Yeah.
quenching for someone to love you.
Yeah.
Like what I was saying before, Reka, I was saying that's why we are saying let's love ourselves
Yes.
first. And if we love ourselves, we know that this, if someone raises a voice to me, I walk away.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
someone gets angry, I walk away. If
Yeah.
someone push things around, I will not stay, I'll run. So all
Yeah.
those come back to self-love again. But the red
Yeah.
flags, we see them every day. Even when you want to see red flags for someone who's being abused,
Yeah.
you can, because some people, they don't know that they're abused, but us
Yeah.
outsiders, we can see that they're abused. All those
Yeah.
controlling parts that we were saying, we were talking about, the possessiveness that we were talking about, um, you name it, you name
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think for me, the red flags that now I now recognize, but I didn't recognize when I was going through my most of my adult life. One was the expectation that anything I earned, my financials, my assets, would be managed by the person I was with. Right. So I've also seen this with my mother, because my mother didn't work, but my mother inherited, she had received property from her parents. And I do remember when there were opportunities, there were a couple of instances when she sold her land property. My father
Okay.
intervened and made sure that she got lesser than the price that was negotiated at. And my mother didn't say anything. Like, she didn't know how to say no at that point in time, because that's how it was normalized. So, that financial control. And I will say this again, financials are a very important aspect of
True that.
abuse and violence, because that's one space where you are in that person's control. So
Yeah.
for me, that's a big red alert. If the person expects me to be, financially responsible for them, or
Mm.
expects me to not manage my finances, I think that's a
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
red flag
Yeah.
for me. Right?
Yeah.
I think one more thing that's a big red flag, as you talked about love bombing. If someone's trying to tell me that I cannot live without you for every second of the day, I think you have a problem, and I'm running for the
And
hills.
having all these kind of petty names, like, let's say in a week, you're now darling, my angel, all those kind of things, petty names. You know that, that's a red flag.
Not too soon. If you've been around for a long time, and then it's how organically your relationship grows, and it's okay. But that you're right. That's something that the love bombing, as they call it. I heard there's a term recently for it, and that's called love bombing. So if you're being love
Yeah,
bombed, be very, very, very aware. And there was something else on my mind, and it's just slipped my mind, because this is like such a vast ocean, and there's so much to talk about it. So
yeah.
before we wind up, right, do you have any advice for the people who are listening, and particularly for young women and parents of daughters and sons who want to create a better world for their children? What would you have to say to them?
Okay. First, I would like to speak to mothers, like, who have their daughters. I
Mm-hmm.
would like to, if we kids, if we, your daughters, come to you to seek help, open
Yeah,
your arms for us,
yeah,
because you are our only hope. Because it
yeah,
starts with you parents to break the cycle. We know when you grow up, we grew up, this
yeah,
is the kind of things that you saw happening, which was normal to you. But we are saying, let it start with you as
yeah,
our parents. If you
yeah,
come saying, Mom, I can't do this anymore, open your
yeah,
arms for us, embrace
yeah,
us, encourage us to move on. And my little sisters and sisters out there, I'm saying there's no excuse to abuse.
Yeah.
There's no excuse to abuse, and there's no abuse which is better.
Yeah.
Be it emotionally, be it
Yeah.
financially, there's no abuse which is better.
Yeah.
Choose choose you first before everyone.
Yeah.
Choose you
Yeah.
first before everyone. And remember, for all those kind of thing, if you have attention, I always tell my other friends out there, take a breath, think, is it worth it or not? And walk
Yeah.
away. Because we are saying this abuse is not only for women only. Even
Yeah.
men, they are getting it from women. So it
Yeah.
applies, this kind of advice, it applies to both of us.
Yeah.
If we have
Absolutely.
attention,
Yeah.
let's not resolve with violence. Take a breath, walk away, and come resolve this when emotions are down. I'm saying to all people around the world, let's just join hands and end this hidden pandemic. It starts with you and me to finish this, and it starts now. Let's create the dosage now and break the cycle. Thank you so much for having me on this live stream. I'm so excited. We managed to end, though we were having some distraction, but
It's
it
okay.
went.
Precious, I'm just going to take a moment to weigh in on what you said. One, love does not hurt. And this is a very important, as this is a very important myth that parents have to challenge with their children. Please don't tell your boys that if you like a girl, it's okay to pull at her hair or push her down. That's not
Yeah,
showing love. Please don't teach your daughters that if the guy is not interested in you, he's being rude to you, he's being offensive to you. Please don't teach her that love means hurt. Love is not hurting. It's just not.
no,
So it's
yeah,
time we change that narrative that love means you're happy, you're thriving, you're with somebody who's encouraging you to grow. I
yeah,
think the second thing for me, what you said about mothers opening their arms, it's really so important because I
yeah,
know every time I went to my mom and said, "This is what's happening," she would always say, "I'm with you. Whatever it is, I'm with you." And I do remember there was this one time when I was exiting a toxic relationship, and I said I'm leaving, and she said, "You know what? Don't provoke an argument because I've been beaten up. And I will tell you this that the slide between angry conversation to physical
yeah,
violence is
yeah,
seconds. It's just a few
yeah,
seconds. So I
sure,
want you to get out of that house safe. So don't,
yeah,
whatever happens, don't get angry, don't react, grit your teeth, whatever it is, take
yeah,
your stuff and run. That's all I want
and
you to do.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's very powerful advice. I want to thank everybody who's joined us today. Halcyon, especially to you, thank you so much for being so vocal, for sharing, all that you've been saying. I mean, we're just very, very, very grateful. Padmaja, thank you for joining us. I can see more people are watching us. Please do drop in your comments. Please do share what you think. Please do share this live video around because this is a very important conversation. And I want to also say, because we've had so many technical glitches and we've had so much of challenges with the sound and the internet and everything, I also want to say why I wanted to have this conversation with Precious. It wasn't just because Precious and I have similar journeys and we've talked about it and it's a work she does. There are hundreds and thousands of people who are doing the work that she does and I do. The reason I was very keen on having Precious in this conversation is because I think as women, it's very important that we include voices from across the world.
yeah,
Precious is in
sure,
Africa, I am in India, I know Halcyon is in Canada. There are so many of us. This is a global problem. This is a humanities problem, and we all have to start connecting and talking about these issues together.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
deepest gratitude to everybody who's joined us. Precious, thank you so much for joining
Thank
us. Thank you for this wonderful conversation.